Welcome. We are talking politics and religion without killing each other. I am your host, Corey Nathan. It is an honor to be a part of the Democracy Group, a network of podcasts that examines what's broken in our democracy and how we can work together to fix it. Be sure to join our Patreon, write a review, do all the things. We have links in the show notes to make it easy to do all of it. It really does help. So I don't mean to skim through that, but I appreciate all of the reviews and everything that you can do. It helps us keep having conversations like the one we're having today with Mike Madrid.
I'm here. I'm back.
It's awesome. The triumphant return of Madrid.
Back again.
For those of you who don't know, well, you should. That's a you problem, but you'll get to know him today if this is the first time. Mike Madrid is a veteran American political consultant, one of the country's authoritative experts on Latino voters, and a co-founder of the Lincoln Project. He's the one who famously eats numbers for breakfast and arguably identified one number and now moved the now famous Bannon line. Many would argue, as would I, that was ultimately decisive in beating Donald Trump in 2020. Last time Mike was on, we talked about his incredibly impactful book. By the way, did you have any idea how influential the book would be, The Latino? So before you give your answer, The Latino Century, How America's Largest Minority is Transforming Democracy. Do you have any idea? Did you see this coming?
No. I mean, everybody says, you really write a book to be in the discussion, and I love ideas. I never thought I'd write a book. I felt I needed to kind of say, guys, Democrats, you need to get your act together.
Yeah.
Like, I understand the cultural reasons and the political reasons why you're doing these things, and it's killing you. And there are a lot of people in the Democratic Party that make money off of kind of, arguing that these issues, immigration specifically, is this, prime mover for Latino voters. It's never been true. And I was just worried. And the Lincoln Project, I saw the numbers going squirrely. Their campaign kept saying, no, it's not happening. Of course it happened. I saw it happening again, and the same denial from the same people. And there's just a danger. And I was like, I've got to do something. Like, you can't just do what we did with the Lincoln Project and then let it slip away because of just malpractice. And that's what was happening. But no, Corey, I mean, like, the book comes out and literally the world just kind of shifted within a matter of weeks on the discussion. The Democrats kind of figured it out. As I say, I'm not saying that the White House read my book, but I'm not saying they didn't either. I have had conversations with them informally. They are listening. I'm not saying that they're taking all of my advice, but they've taken virtually 100% of what I've been proposing, both publicly and in the book. They can say, it's for other reasons, and that's fine. But the data has been overwhelming. That's why I wrote the book. It's like, you guys need to make the pivots if you have a chance at winning this race, and they have, to their credit.
Well, to your point, I forget when the last time you were on was, but it was a little bit before the book came out. I think maybe it was in May. And one of the things we talked about was how important the housing industry, home construction is. Yeah. And to hear Kamala talk about that in her convention speech, it was like either she read it or her speechwriter read it, or her, strategist. So that was just one of a handful of messaging and policy initiatives that I've heard that could be literally copied and pasted right out of the book.
That is a gratifying feeling. And like I said, one of the two things happened. Either it was having an influence and impact. I think it was. I'm not saying that they were like, oh, let's copy this book and let's run on this, because that didn't happen. That's not what I was saying. That's not what they're saying. But the evidence that I was pointing out was so overwhelming. And like I said, even if they never heard of Mike Madrid, then the evidence is so overwhelming that to show that what I was saying was right. It's the right direction. They've made the right moves. Now, have they done it, with enough time? We're gonna see. I mean, Kamala's numbers aren't great right now with Latinos. They're just not. You're hearing the inside spin still going, oh, things are great. We fixed it, reset. That's not true. It's better than it was under Biden's polling, but it's not as good as Biden was in 2020, which was a historically bad number. So there's problems, and there's still these institutions in the Democratic Party that do not want to hear that non-white people might be voting Republican, and the numbers are getting better for Trump, not worse.
Yeah. It is concerning. So let's get specific on some of the messaging and some of the policies. What
Mhm.
are some of the ways, specific ways that you've heard? I talked about housing already, but what are some of the other ways that you've seen them tailor their messaging along the lines of what you've been talking about in the book? And frankly, for years now, op-eds that you've written for the New York
Yeah.
Times for years.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, let's be really specific on the immigration piece because it's the central one. It was the one I was so critical of. And look, I'm a huge, huge advocate of the immigrant, of the refugee. I've spent my whole life fighting for the least among us. My children have gone to the border to serve and volunteer with refugees. I've spent every major fight on immigration reform since 1986. I've been in there, getting my hands dirty, fighting for this, and I will continue to do so. So I take a backseat to nobody on this issue. But I'm also a political professional and I can read crosstabs and I understand evidence really, really damn well. And these numbers have been moving away from the Democrats for over a decade because they have emphasized immigration as the primary issue for Latino voters. And it is quantifiably not true. It has never been true. And it is absolutely not only not true now, it's becoming less so. In fact, Pew Research, which is the gold standard for Latino polling, just came out today showing that immigration for Democratic Latinos is near the bottom for Republican Latinos. This growing number of Republican Latinos, it's the third top issue. And if they're voting Republican, it means border security is more important than immigration reform. And those are two distinct issues. I don't want to get too in the weeds because I want to answer the question because it is important, but I'm using this to say the Democrats have lost the tactical battle by trying to couple immigration reform with border security. And Kamala Harris's pivot, and it's a 180-degree pivot. I wrote a big editorial on this in the New York Times in January saying if Biden's going to have a chance at reelection, he's got to pivot. He's got to ditch this bad thinking. They have done it completely. Even I'm surprised how much they've done it. But Kamala Harris, let me put it this way. This is really striking, Corey. The Democratic nominee, a black woman, has taken on a conservative Republican policy position as her own. This is not a move to the center. This is a move to the right. This is deep in conservative territory. Okay. And I was sharing with some Latino students in Fullerton, Orange County, just a few days ago. If George W. Bush had heard a Republican politician talking like this in 2000, he would have denounced this as
Mm,
anti-American. That's how far right we're talking. Okay. So the Overton window of where all of the American public has moved on this issue is not to the center. It is deep in conservative territory. And the Democratic nominee is not only owning those policy prescriptions, it was the main issue ad that she ran. And more importantly, she's going to the border to reinforce this in a couple of days in the Arizona border, basically standing by the wall and saying, we'll build a wall if we need to with a bunch of, armed guards and law enforcement, border security agents with guns. Uh, that's not a bad thing. Okay.
yeah.
It's not. And I've never argued that it is. It doesn't, border security doesn't make you racist by itself. There's a racist way to do it, as Donald Trump reminds us on a regular basis, and Republicans tend to now more than ever. But what I do want people to be mindful of is this is not a small thing. This is one of the most profound shifts in this very historic election, and a lot of crazy shit's gone on.
Yeah.
This is the Democratic Party can never go back to what it was. It can't. It can't put that genie back in the bottle. You got a black woman out there owning a conservative policy position. They can't just be like, oh, well, never mind. Let's go back to, no position on borders. And this means as I write on my Substack, this is the end of racialized Latino voting, in my opinion. It's going to take a little bit of time to get there, but not very long. When you have this kind of a dynamic changing everything, it's just an extraordinary, extraordinary moment in American politics.
So one of my concerns, and I think one of your current concerns about the Republican Party, is that the lunatics have taken over the asylum.
Mhm.
That it's a party that has succumbed to some of the most extreme characters. Now, the Democratic Party, we see somebody at the top of the ticket, of the Democratic ticket, who is moving to your point, considerably not just to the center, but to the right of center on this specific policy. Does she have the permission structure within the Democratic Party to legislate that way, or is she actually paving this road and say, "Hey guys, this is where we're going"?
That's such a great question. The answer is, well, first of all, you're not seeing sort of this uprising on the left the way you were like with Gaza, right? It's
Yeah,
like you
yeah,
can't go there, you can't do that. It's like you're not seeing Latinos marching down the street, lighting their hair on fire, saying this is racist, even though they have been doing exactly that with Republicans for 30 years, the exact same policy positions,
yeah,
the exact same thing. Now they're like all, yeah, let's have a concert at the DNC convention. Let's do a balloon drop. Like, yeah, let's go win this thing, right? This is who we are. And like I said, I'm not overly criticizing it, but I want people to pay attention to it because it does mark something very significant. And what it really does mean is those voices that were defining this issue as a racial litmus test issue have been marginalized. They have been silenced. They have lost this battle, which there was never really any evidence for in the first place. And the reason why the Democrats allowed themselves to be dragged into this cul-de-sac, political cul-de-sac dead end, was because there weren't enough white progressives and white Democrats to say, there's no evidence for this.
right,
It's nonsense. And there's this idea that somehow if you're a black or brown or a non-white voice, you've got more credibility on every issue. And so you need to be listened to. And I think that Kamala Harris is challenging that basic assumption, which is great to see. And I said, especially coming from a black woman from San Francisco. She's like, no, we're not doing that anymore. We're going to go where the voters are. More importantly, this is the most important piece on why you're not seeing any pushback. Latino voters are there.
right.
Quantifiably, the Latino voter is very different now and going forward than it was over the past 30 years. And that, again, is the thesis of my book. So the timing was perfect politically for the book, but it's also nice to see it actually unfold in real time where the candidate for the Democratic Party, who I basically wrote it for, it was Biden at the time, but it's the same whether it's Harris, is listening, like literally housing policy, immigration policy, all of it over and over. It's like it's beautiful and gratifying and validating for me as somebody who's not directly involved in this campaign cycle to be moving the discussion in this direction because I could not have scripted this any better. And in fact, I spent 2 years writing a book and it's all playing out exactly as I laid out.
Yeah, yeah. So you say for at least 30 years. I certainly look at the 2012 election in an increasing way until arguably the end of July of this year.
Mhm.
We saw the argument from the Democrats was that it's identity driven,
Mhm.
that this piece of the population is part of our coalition because of who they are, who they're descendants of. Whereas you're saying, guys, I'm looking at second, third, fourth generation Latinos, and
Mhm.
they're not voting just because of the shade of their skin.
Mhm.
They're voting based on issues. So
Yes.
on an issue, we talked about. I think you've also referred to it as a Marshall Plan on housing.
Right.
We just talked about border security.
Mhm.
What are some other things that you think the Harris Walls campaign has an opportunity to talk about in these next less than 6 weeks now on an issues basis? And not to jinx anything, but moving forward, what do they have a chance of implementing if there's indeed a Harris administration?
Well, there's the easy ones like the no tax on tips, right? Which is economic populist, which is Donald Trump's idea. It's not even his idea. He stole it from somebody else. It's not a new idea. But then she takes it on, right? It's like, that's a good idea, but I'm going to make it for the working class, which is great because I mean, technically a venture capitalist or a hedge fund manager can say my $20 million salary was a tip, right? You can literally reconstitute your compensation structure and say, I only got paid $100,000 a year. The other 19 million, 900,000 was a tip from Goldman Sachs. I mean, truly you can. And they would, of course. We all know that that's exactly what they would do. So suddenly there's no taxes to be paid on all these upper income earners. But more importantly, and where I think it really comes to fruition is on the opportunity economy that she's talking about. She gave a speech just today in Pennsylvania where Kamala Harris is talking about creating a tax code that allows for ownership of firms and companies by employees and would incentivize owners to allow workers to have greater equity. Now, this, and again, I'm old enough now to watch the arc of history change and transform, but that's a Jack Kemp idea. This is part of the ownership society. Newt Gingrich used to talk about this in 1994. The home ownership plan is a Jack Kemp idea.
Yeah.
The name opportunity economy has echoes of opportunity zones, which Obama put in, which were stolen literally from Jack Kemp's enterprise zones. You take that, you take the border security plans, you take the NATO stuff, you take the energy drilling rates with which we're doing domestic drilling, which is higher than ever before. Corey, 80% of what she's talking about is Republicanism from the 1980s.
Yeah.
It is literally the Republican Party with the exception of abortion and gay marriage. Okay, so be it. Where I'm at anyway.
Right.
You know what I mean? So this is, even her language at the floor of the DNC was literally, we want to build the most lethal military that the world has ever known. Like,
yeah.
If that's not Cheney Bush, I don't know what the hell is.
Right.
So, like, it is remarkable to me how fluid the Democratic voter base is, how forgiving and or forgetful it is, and being like, okay, we're basically Republicans now. We're Reagan Republicans, and I will have this debate with anybody. There are some differences, but 90% of what she is talking to working class people about is Jack Kemp, Ronald Reagan language, policy, and rhetoric from the 1980s. That's why I became a Republican.
Right.
So a lot of times, Democrats will be like, well, why, Republican, why, how are you so comfortable with Kamala Harris as comrade Marxist? I'm like, how can you be comfortable? You've come my way, Democrats. Like, everything that you're saying you believed in, and why you're chastising Ronald Reagan, still, this is Reaganism. I mean, I don't think I'm overstating that. I'm certainly not overstating it much if I am, but literally from energy production to foreign policy to global engagement to border security, where she's to the right of all the Republicans. Reagan never spoke like this. George W. Bush never spoke like this. Romney never spoke like this. To tax incentives to lift people up, to providing ownership through equity and home ownership or into the firms and enterprises that they own. This is all neoconservative mantra. This is the orthodoxy of the Republican Party, as it was before Trump.